RTK is real-time analytics. So it carries sensors that can be used for border delineation, border mapping, and very many things about borders. Now, generally we say, oh, it may be cheap for states to buy, but we are looking at technology in itself, not looking at it as a system. So when we are talking drone technology, you shouldn't be saying that you just buy this and keep it. Like having a car, that you don't look at the entire ecosystem where you just train personnel, train engineers, have certain sustainment capabilities, and then having regulations that we can use to work with. Because without regulation, so for this, we've been able to develop a few things in the printer. Most of these things are from outside, including the thread that are being used to actually put in the printer. So, but with this, we've been able to do internally. We've done a few local sales and shops and this actually was procured from outside, but what we've done is to domesticate a few things on ground that can be used to be able to support. At the moment, we are providing support for a lot of IOCs in the Niger Delta area. We are using the DJI. This can go for 10 hours. But this is faithful, it goes for about 6 hours. But you know, some of the issues that we have on ground are issues of communication and then data link. Because you can go further, but without data link, your distance face with the National Boundary Commission to assist. But as it were, you know that most of our borders are not delineated. Even when they are itself, the insurgency has made it so much that people are not there on ground. And that is why drone is so important for us to use not only in the warfare, in prosecuting the war that we're having, but we can use it to give us the accurate mapping of where we are. Some of the problems that we're having intra or internal emanates from poor delineation of traditional markings that we've had before. Some are not even delineated. So you have people fighting either for the resources for those areas or even the lines that people have, because even the movement of the rivers and rivers most especially were issues that were used in those days to delineate a border, that there's a tree here, all those things are natural phenomena that move, even rivers. So we need to define our border clearly, but it must also be accepted by the communities for it so that problems can be resolved. It's one of, not the solution. So, but the aspect of employment of drone, if we are not careful to regulate it, as you rightly observe, will become a problem for us because everybody will now own it and can employ any payload on it to create problem. But you are only looking at it from the aspect of dropping something that can cause you problems, but you are not looking at it from even the privacy aspect of it. Because it means I can fly it over your house and see what is happening in your house. You understand? So, and that is why regulation is very important. And we have the Office of National Security Advisor. We also have the National Civil Aviation Authority guiding the employment of this. But just as you have things, people bringing in, and some other people are also bringing in this thing without passing through the right proper channel. So we need enforcement. But is NCAA empowered, or do they have the resources to put boots on ground to enforce? Are our people ready to even bring those information to NCAA to assist them in enforcement? Because if we don't do that, just as we have people in ungoverned spaces creating problem, that is how you see people also having drones, because they are beginning to employ drones to have situational awareness before they move into certain areas. So we must also begin to work and counter some of those things. So it's a whole challenge for the nation.
Thank you very much.
Your name again, sir?
I'm Rear Admiral Lassa, retired.
Very good.
This is the LiDAR, can be used for mapping. This is the multispectral, the same purpose. And this is the synthetic aperture radar that looks through the foliages, the trees and the rest that usually are used by the military and so on. But this can also be used in determining areas that want to operate. Now the RTK and PPK, that's the real-time kinetics, and the post-kinetic aspect of it are what we use to actually be able to get the positioning, precise positioning to centimeter. When we use the GPS that we have, just like your car, sometimes when you go on your GPS and it's giving you route, you discover that it moves
to certain area, or at times when it's moving, you discover that the area where you want to turn is ahead. Sometimes you will have passed it before you realize that that is where it is. It's because the actual accuracy is affected by so many other things, including atmospheric condition. So what we are doing and designing and defining maps, we need to use this, the RTK, the PPK software and system, that we can be able to use those data and correct it to the minutest, so that whatever you are doing is centimeter measurement. And that is what we have for this. So we also have the relay for those of us that are situated in several areas that we cannot actually be able to operate. We need the relay to assist us. Now, in drone application for border management, we are looking at what it can do: boundary delineation, boundary demarcation, interstate boundary mapping, local government boundary surveys, community boundary identification, boundary monitoring, disaster management, land administration, environmental monitoring. These are things we can use for the purposes of drone, but like I've said, please always picture it that most of them are done because of the sensor that is carrying, that camera that you see under it. That is because of it that you actually monitor. Then what are the benefits of the drone? Accuracy, rapid data collection, cost effectiveness. Is cheaper than you employing the use of manned aircraft. Access to difficult terrain. It can operate anywhere. I can carry it and move it from where I am in a remote area to control. Enhanced safety. If it's a volatile environment, I don't need to go there. I just send the drone. I can be here, the drone will be in Sokoto. High resolution mapping, improved boundary delineation, effective boundary delineation and monitoring, and supports disaster resolution. These are other aspects of what the drone gives to us. I hope it's clear enough for us to see. Now, drone technology, I think we've talked about this versus drone. We've said we shouldn't be looking at technology, but be looking at the system itself. And the system that we're looking at has to do with the standard operating procedure, the policies, the manpower, and the rest. When we are looking at that aspect, we will now be able to look at the cost of employing the drone itself. Now, this is a system. If we are talking of a system, this is what it entails. And that system has its own control station. You need to have a control station and so on for it to operate. Now, why do states need them? We've talked about the challenges that we have on ground. Based on those challenges, we need to have something that will be able to assist us to manage our environment. And these are some of the things we have for interstate because of porous borders, because of poor delineation of certain areas for us to map, and so many other things. So, the slides will be available for us to have a better understanding of some of the things we put about here. What are the challenges to the effective use of drone? First of all, we do not have even a policy that we have that can integrate all of us together. We need that policy that will integrate us together to be able to talk to one another. If we don't have a policy that guides us, the NCAA itself has been able to provide some kind of guidelines, including with the Office of the National Security Advisor. For us that are operating drone today, we wouldn't have been there if we don't have a clearance from the National Security Advisor. And then we'll have to go through the National Civil Aviation Authority to be able to get ourselves acquainted to even operating within the airspace. So if we are talking of a state owning it, we need to pass through those processes for us to be able to achieve having even those particular aspects. We've talked of the constitutionality of where even the government takes us. Because even if you have those aspects, where do you have the access to even the database, the national database? So we need to have certain things in place for us to be able to access, including in the national database itself. Let me read through my phone. It's not very clear up there. Drone assistant boundary surveys. This has to do with the national and state assemblies. We are looking at overlapping institutional or weak intergovernmental coordination. I think this has also been raised because if we are having that, it's easy for me, rather than spending money at the state level, I can actually derive my strength from the federal level. Weak state boundary committees. I would dare say this, weak state boundary committees, that has been stressed even by the first presenters, that I always say that the deputy governors sometimes they look at it in Hausa form, they say it's tie and buyer. So most times you depend on the state governors. Are there resources that have been allocated? Do you have even a proper setup of a geospatial unit for you to assist to do certain things? Because that is where it starts from. High acquisition and maintenance costs of the system, limited technical expertise by the state for you to even develop the manpower. The public understanding on drone use, which is why we are here. Most people do not know the gamut of the opportunities that is offered for the use of drone. The difficult terrain that we have is also an issue. Restricted airspace that we talked about. Then political interference is very key. Because sometimes when we want to do certain things, we look at it that I'm not from place A to place B, and we begin to create certain problems on ground when it comes to application. And then for the bigger problem that we have is even the community. So when we begin to put even the drones on ground, there may be community resistance as part of the thing. Because sometimes when we say we are coming to delineate, some lands belong to the traditional areas, and that is why it is not only drone itself, but we've gone beyond the use of drones. There must be proper community engagement to get things done. Can we look at the strategies that we can be able to solve these problems? Some of the strategies that we have must be done from the state and then the state itself and our national legislators. Harmonizing the legal framework. Harmonization of legal framework. We must align state laws with federal government laws. When we see some things that are happening in Lagos State, sometimes it's as if it's going against some of the laws that we have. So these are areas of the National Assembly itself and the NCAA. We have to develop guidelines, national guidelines. Let it not be that it remains with the NBC itself, but it must come down to the lower level. We must strengthen legal recognition of drone-derived evidence. Now, when we go to courts, do we really have, for example, if we are able to develop data from drones, how is it an evidence-based document that we can use, the data? We must find a way and put them together as a data that can be admissible even in court when there are issues. Because when boundary issues come up, they are there in courts like what we have in Akwa Ibom and Cross River State. These are boundary issues too that has to do with resources, because Cross River wouldn't be asking for it if it's just land that has no value. So we need to have this done. Then we have to establish national boundary intergovernmental coordination mechanism. Yes, we may say we have the NBC and the state coordinator, but for the state coordinators, do we have a joint technical working group that we are able to meet regularly? Do we have certain things that we put together that we can go to the National Boundary Commission to be able to derive data? We have to establish a national drone mapping standard, because as it is, we are saying the state should go and do certain things. Local government should do certain things. Is there a standard that has been established that guides us in the operations that we are having? We need to do that. Modernization of our geospatial capability for accurate mapping. Yes, we are still using the normal land-based GIS to map, but it's not properly admissible at some times. It is costly. Manpower it takes, even the one that we're having today by the use of drones, and we're having ground control stations. Time is coming that those ground control stations will not be used, because those things can be done with whatever we have up there, that is with the drones. And then periodical updates of boundary data sets. Now for the implementation, look at the established dedicated funding and sustainability of mapping programs. Most of the states, if I would say, do not even have a budget. And this has to be included in the budgeting for whatever we have and have it in budget circles. And as we said, it was suggested earlier that the local government should have something that in the semblance of establishing a GIS unit. I would say when a particular place is defined, what do you need it for? So why can't it be domesticated at the state level so that the manpower is domesticated there and you can derive it to do certain things at the local government level? And we have to adopt, which leads me to the adoption of shared services model to reduce acquisition of drones. Even the private agencies and the rest can provide you with some of this data that you can use for anything you are doing. Then access to donor funding. Most times we depend on the state government to do certain things. There are opportunities that are bound everywhere, especially when we have to come up with migration issues. There are opportunities that we can look at to be able to get certain funding that will support us. Then technical training, and then professional training and issue of research and so on. Then we have to also create, this is a suggestion, that we can be able to create state border technology units. Deployment of renewable energy, especially because when you want to employ the drone, most infrastructure do not abound in most of our communities and rural areas, especially for like internet connectivity and so on and so forth. We may begin to use, even if it is the Elon Musk kind of technology to put there for people to even have services. It does not cost much for us to deploy that even in our community. Depending on the rate, these are things that can be used for us to be able to apply and then to improve our digital infrastructure. Standard operating procedure we talked about, develop data governance policy, strengthen cyber security, because without that, with what is happening here, that even the insurgents are beginning to use drones, it can impact on whatever it is we are doing. We should go straight to the one for National Assembly. The role of the legislators. And oversight, because so many things are happening today that drones are being used everywhere. If we don't guide it, it becomes an issue that even your privacy will be infringed upon. The strengthen statutory collaboration among the NBC itself, Office of the Surveyor General of the Federation, and other federal agencies. Issue of funding. For National Assembly, we should be able to look at where we can appropriate funding for the federal area. We've talked about the NBC, establish National Intervention Fund. We need to do that because for National Boundary Commission, the data they are generating is so important that every other thing, including security, depends on it. If we don't have a clearly defined border, how do we operate drones? With what data are we using to operate? So proper funding and intervention, especially intervention fund, need to be put on ground, and then to approve grants and so on, limited technical capacity and so on and so on. We must look at those areas. So I'll just go to my recommendation policy. Above all, the recommendation that I will see before all this is that we need to carry out an audit. NBC itself can initiate an audit for us to know what we have. Because we have so many things that have to do with technology. But the fact is that we don't know where they are, we don't know who owns them. So if we're able to carry out an audit, it limits the resources we are going to spend, including what the private sector has. We have so much that is on ground that is related to boundary definition, including the security that we're having. If we're able to now audit this particular thing, it helps us to define where we want to go. So this audit is very important, so that states will not even spend some resources the way it is. But beyond that, I believe that with the Boundary Commission being in place, we can be able to sit down and design how funding should come up. Perhaps we can be able to put them regionally, where one has discovered that the problems we have in a particular region, let's say Northwest, is peculiar to each and every state. So if we're having the same problems, why can't we have the regional governors sitting together and talking? If we want to set up a particular entity, why can't we pool our resources together, establish that, and be able to draw strength from it that can be used from the state? So the first thing to addressing some of these issues that we have by way of recommendation is to follow up, pursue auditing. So this is the final thing I have to say, sir, as for audit. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.